The lights inside Threshold 9 station hummed with a cold, sterile brightness. Captain Han Doyen stood near the back wall of the diplomatic chamber, his hands clasped behind his back, his face showing nothing. He had learned long ago that showing emotion during negotiations was a mistake. The aliens across the table did not understand human expressions anyway. The Vraktul delegation sat on the other side of the room. They were massive creatures, each one standing over 9 feet tall even when sitting down. Their scales were dark green and gray, thick as armor plating. Their eyes were yellow and cold, like a predator watching prey. Commander Thulvrax was the largest of them all. He sat in the center, his clawed hands resting on the table, his mouth curved in what might have been a smile. It was not a friendly smile. Ambassador Quan Jiwu sat at the human side of the table. She was speaking calmly, explaining humanity's proposal for shared mining rights in the disputed sectors. Her voice was steady and professional. Doyen admired that about her. She never let the aliens see her frustration, even when they laughed at her words. And they were laughing now. Thulvrax made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. The other Vraktul joined in. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Mining rights?" Thulvrax said in his deep, booming voice. The translator device made his words understandable, but the contempt in his tone needed no translation. "Your species barely has 10 colony worlds. You ask to share resources with an empire of 300 systems? This is amusing." Ambassador Quan did not react. "Humanity may be young in galactic terms, but we have technology and determination that could benefit both our peoples." Thulvrax waved one massive hand dismissively. "You are small, weak. Your ships are toys compared to ours. Why should we share anything with you?" Before Quan could respond, the door at the side of the chamber slid open. Dr. Park Mirai rushed in, looking embarrassed and worried. She was young, only in her mid-20s, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore the white and blue uniform of the Xenobiology Division. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, bowing slightly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Behind her, something small and fluffy waddled into the room. It was about the size of a large cat, covered in golden brown feathers and fur. It had 4 legs, tiny wings that flapped uselessly, and a small hooked beak. Its eyes were large and dark, filled with innocent curiosity. It chirped, a high-pitched sound that echoed in the quiet chamber. Doyen felt his stomach tighten. He knew exactly what that creature was. "What is that?" Thulvrax asked, leaning forward. His yellow eyes fixed on the small animal. "That's Spark," Mirai said, moving quickly to scoop up the creature. "My Griffin. He's just a baby. He must have gotten out of my quarters. I'm really sorry." The baby Griffin chirped again and squirmed in Mirai's arms, trying to see everything at once. Its tiny talons gripped her sleeve. Thulvrax stood up. The movement was sudden and made everyone in the room tense. He walked around the table, his heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate slightly. He towered over Mirai, looking down at her and the small creature she held. "A griffin?" he said. "This is what humans create? This tiny squeaking thing?" "He's only 6 months old," Mirai explained, holding Spark closer. "Griffins are part of Earth's ecological restoration project. We engineered them to—" Thulvrax reached down with one massive hand and plucked Spark from Mirai's arms. She gasped and reached up, but the commander was too tall, too strong. He held the baby griffin up by the scruff of its neck, dangling it in the air. Spark let out a frightened squeak and flailed its tiny legs. "This is a weapon," Thulvrax said, looking at his fellow Vraktul. "This is what humanity brings to the galaxy? Pets? Toys?" He shook the griffin slightly. Spark squeaked louder, its wings flapping frantically. "Please," Mirai said, her voice strained. "You're scaring him. Give him back." Thulvrax laughed, that grinding, rumbling sound. "Your species breeds weakness. Look at this pathetic creature. It cannot even fly. It cries like an infant, and you bring it to a diplomatic meeting?" He looked at Ambassador Quan. "This tells me everything I need to know about humanity. You are soft, sentimental, weak." Doyen felt his jaw tighten. He took a slow breath through his nose. His hands, still clasped behind his back, formed into fists, but he did not move. Not yet. Mireille was shaking, her eyes fixed on Spark. The baby Griffin had stopped struggling. It hung limply in Thulvrax's grip, its dark eyes now locked on the commander's face. There was something in that stare, something more than fear. Doyen recognized it. He had seen it before. "Commander," Ambassador Quan said carefully, "perhaps we should return to the negotiations. Dr. Me, Park will remove her companion and we can continue." "Yes, yes," Thulvrax said, sounding bored. He dropped Spark. The baby Griffin fell through the air and landed hard on the floor. It let out a pained chirp and scrambled on the smooth surface before Mireille dove to pick it up. She held Spark close to her chest, checking him for injuries. The Griffin was trembling, making small distressed sounds. Mireille's eyes were wet, but she blinked rapidly and turned to leave the chamber. As she passed Doyen, he leaned his head down slightly and muttered in Korean, so quietly that only she could hear, "You just signed your fat death warrant." Mireille's eyes went wide. She looked at Doyen, then at Spark, then back at the commander who was already returning to his seat. Understanding flashed across her face. She nodded once and hurried out of the room, with Spark held protectively against her. The negotiations continued for another 3 hours. The Vroktul gave humanity almost nothing. A few minor trade agreements, restricted access to 2 small asteroid fields, and a promise to consider future discussions. Ambassador Quan accepted the terms with grace. She knew, as they all did, that this was just the beginning. When the meeting finally ended, the delegations separated. The Vroktul left first, their heavy footsteps echoing down the station corridors. Thulvrax was laughing about something, his voice carrying back to the humans. Doyen walked beside Ambassador Quan as they headed to their own section of the station. "That went poorly," Quan said quietly. "Yes," Doyen agreed. "What did you say to Dr. Park?" "I saw you speak to her." Doyen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I told her the truth." "Which is?" "That Commander Thulvrax just made a very serious mistake." Quan looked at him. "Because he grabbed the Griffin?" "Because he heard it while it was young," Doyen said. His voice was calm, but there was something hard underneath. Griffins bond for life. They remember everything, every face, every voice, every person who threatened them, or their bonded human. "It's just a baby," Quan said. "Now it is," Doyen replied. "But in 2 years, Spark will be fully grown, 12 feet tall at the shoulder, wings that can carry it faster than most fighter craft, claws that can tear through ship armor, and a memory that never, ever forgets." They reached their quarters. Quan stopped at her door. "Do you think we'll see the commander again?" Doyen smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I know we will. And when we do, he's going to learn why Earth doesn't create pets. We create family, and family protects each other." Inside her room, Mireille sat on her bed with Spark curled in her lap. The baby Griffin had stopped trembling, but his eyes were still open, still staring at nothing. Mireille stroked his feathers gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." But even as she said it, she knew Doyen was right. Spark would remember. And one day, Commander Thulvrax would understand exactly what he had done. The next morning, the negotiations continued in the same cold chamber. The Vroktul arrived exactly on time, filling the room with their massive presence. Commander Thulvrax sat in the same seat as before, looking as arrogant as ever. He did not apologize for what had happened with Spark. He did not even mention it. But he remembered. Throughout the morning session, whenever there was a pause in the discussions, he would make comments. "Where is your pet today?" he would ask, that grinding laugh following his words. "Did it run away crying?" His fellow Vroktul found this hilarious. Ambassador Quan ignored the comments. She continued presenting humanity's proposals, speaking about trade routes and technology exchanges. But Doyen could see the tension in her shoulders. This was not going well. During the lunch break, Doyen found Mireille in the station's observation deck. She stood by the large window looking out at the stars. Spark was with her, sitting on a special perch that she had brought. The baby Griffin was quiet, his head tucked under one tiny wing. "How is he?" Doyen asked, walking up beside her. "Physically, he's fine," Mireille said. Her voice was tight. "But he's different. He hasn't chirped since yesterday. He barely ate this morning. He just stares." Doyen looked at the small creature. Spark's eyes were half closed, but even from here, Doyen could see awareness in them, intelligence. "Tell me about Griffins," Doyen said. "The real story, not the official reports." Mireille was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The official story is that we created them for Earth's restoration project. After the climate wars, we needed apex predators to balance the ecosystems. Eagles and big cats were extinct or nearly extinct. So we built Griffins. We took the best parts of what was left and created something new." "And the unofficial story?" "The unofficial story is that we created them because we needed guardians," Mireille said softly. "The galaxy is dangerous. Humanity is new and small. We needed something that could protect us, something loyal, something intelligent. Griffins bond with one person for life. Once that bond forms, they will die to protect their human, and they never ever forget a threat." She reached over and gently stroked Spark's head. The baby Griffin leaned into her touch but did not open his eyes. "I found Spark in an illegal breeding facility on Mars," Mireille continued. "Someone was trying to sell Griffin eggs on the black market. When I raided the place, all the other eggs were already dead or dying, but Spark's egg was still warm. I carried it with me for 3 weeks until he hatched. The first face he saw was mine. That's when the bond formed. And now Thulvrax has threatened him," Doyen said. "Yes?" Mireille's voice was barely a whisper. "Spark knows. Even though he's just a baby, he understands that creature hurt him. And Griffins remember. They remember everything." Doyen nodded slowly. He had suspected as much. "The commander doesn't know what he's done." "No," Mireille agreed. "He thinks Spark is just an animal, a pet. He doesn't understand." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Doyen received a message on his communicator. It was from the Vractal delegation. Commander Thulvrax wanted a private meeting, just the two of them. Ambassador Quan was suspicious. "Why would he want to meet with you? You're not even part of the negotiating team." "Maybe he's curious," Doyen said. But he had his own suspicions. The commander had noticed him yesterday, had seen him standing in the corner, watching, had maybe even heard him mutter those words. "Be careful," Quan warned. The meeting took place in a neutral room, one of the station's many conference spaces. When Doyen arrived, Thulvrax was already there. The massive alien stood by the window, his hands behind his back. He turned when Doyen entered. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other, measuring, assessing. "You are the one who muttered something yesterday," Thulvrax said finally. "After I handled the pet." "I am," Doyen replied calmly. "What did you say?" Doyen met the commander's yellow eyes without flinching. "I said you just signed your death warrant." Thulvrax's mouth curved into that predator smile. "Because I picked up a small animal? You threaten me over that?" "I don't threaten," Doyen said. "I warn. There's a difference." "Explain." Doyen walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "That creature you grabbed is young now. In 2 years, it will be fully grown, 12 feet tall, 30-foot wingspan, claws that can shred metal, and a brain that rivals human intelligence in some ways." "So it becomes dangerous," Thulvrax said, sounding unimpressed. "Many creatures are dangerous when grown. This does not concern me." "You're missing the point," Doyen said, still looking at the stars. "Griffins remember. They remember every face, every voice, every scent. They especially remember threats. That baby you grabbed by the neck? He will remember you. And when he is fully grown, when he has the power to act on that memory, he will find you." Thulvrax laughed, that grinding sound. "I fear no beast. I have hunted the death worms of Cala Prime. I have fought the siege bears of Torvin IV. Your Earth creature does not frighten me." Doyen turned to face him. "The Kalorn Confederacy said something similar. They invaded Earth 70 years ago, during the recovery period. They thought we were weak, helpless. They landed ground forces in what used to be North America. We released the wolves. Wolves? Engineered predators, like griffins but smaller. Pack hunters with enhanced intelligence. The Kalorn had superior weapons, superior armor, but the wolves hunted them for 3 months straight, across forests, through cities, over mountains. The wolves never stopped, never gave up. They learned the Kalorn's tactics, adapted, and hunted them to extinction on Earth. Not a single Kalorn soldier made it back to orbit alive. Thulvrax's smile faded slightly. An interesting story, but stories do not win wars. No, Doyen agreed. Memory does. Loyalty does. The bond between a human and their guardian does. You hurt that baby Griffin. You marked yourself as a threat to Dr. Park's bonded companion. Spark will never forget that. And one day, Commander, he will be strong enough to do something about it. You speak as if this is certain. It is, Doyen said simply. As certain as the stars outside this window. You can dismiss it, laugh at it, ignore it. But it will happen. The only question is when. Thulvrax stared at him for a long time. Then he said, Your species is foolish. You create weapons you cannot control and then act surprised when others do not fear them. We don't create weapons, Doyen said quietly. We create family. That's what you don't understand. That's what none of the other species seem to understand about humanity. We bond with things. We make connections. And once those connections are made, we protect them with everything we have. Sentimental weakness, Thulvrax said dismissively. You'll see, Doyen replied. One day, you'll understand. I just hope for your sake that it's not too late when you do. The meeting ended shortly after. Thulvrax clearly considered the conversation finished. Doyen left the room and made his way back to the human quarters. As he walked through the station corridors, he thought about Spark. About the way the baby Griffin had stared at Thulvrax after being dropped. That was not the stare of a dumb animal. That was the stare of something that understood exactly what had happened. That evening, the negotiations concluded. Humanity received minimal concessions, a few trade agreements, limited mining rights, and vague promises of future cooperation. It was barely worth the trip to Threshold 9. The Vroktul clearly considered humans beneath their notice. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Doyen went to Mirai's quarters one last time. She was packing her things, and Spark sat on her shoulder, his tiny claws gripping her uniform. The commander didn't believe me, Doyen said. I didn't think he would, Mirai replied. She looked at Spark, and the baby Griffin chirped softly, the first sound he had made in 2 days. But that's okay, Spark knows. I know, and when the time comes, Thulvrax will learn. 2 years, Doyen said. 2 years, Mirai agreed. Maybe less if we accelerate his growth cycle, but yes, about 2 years. Doyen nodded. He reached out and gently touched Spark's head with one finger. The Griffin looked at him with those intelligent dark eyes and chirped again. Remember, Doyen whispered to the small creature. Remember everything. The human ships left Threshold 9 the next morning. As they jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading back to human space, none of them knew that they would see Commander Thulvrax again much sooner than expected. The galaxy was a smaller place than anyone realized, and fate had a way of bringing enemies back together. The sun rose over New Jeju, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The colony was beautiful in the morning light, with its white buildings and green spaces spreading across the valley. 50,000 humans called this place home. It was one of humanity's youngest colonies, barely 10 years old, but it was thriving. Captain Han Doyen stood on the observation platform of the Defense Center, watching the sunrise. He had been the colony's defense coordinator for 18 months now. It was supposed to be a peaceful assignment, a chance to rest after years of military service. But Doyen knew better than to believe in peace. The galaxy was never truly peaceful. Behind him, he heard the sound of wings. Large wings. He turned and smiled. Spark landed on the platform with barely a sound despite his massive size. The Griffin was fully grown now, standing 12 feet tall at the shoulder. His feathers were golden brown, darker than they had been as a baby, with hints of deep red along his wings. His wingspan stretched 30 feet when fully extended. His talons were as long as knives, his beak sharp enough to tear through steel. But his eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, were the same as they had been 2 years ago. Dr. Park Murray climbed down from the riding saddle strapped to Spark's back. She wore flight gear now, practical and tough, designed for high-altitude Griffin riding. Her hair was longer than it had been on Threshold 9, pulled back in a thick braid. "Morning, Captain," she said, patting Spark's shoulder. The Griffin lowered his head and chirped, a sound that was now deep and resonant, like a bass note. "Morning," Doyen replied. "Early flight?" "We do the perimeter check every sunrise," Mirai said. "Old habits. Spark likes to fly when the air is cool." Doyen nodded. He knew that Mirai and Spark were inseparable. The bond between them had only grown stronger over the past 2 years. Spark went everywhere with her, always watching, always protective. The other colonists loved the Griffin. Children would come to the research center just to see him, and Spark was always gentle with them, letting them touch his feathers and feed him treats. But Doyen also knew that beneath that gentle exterior was one of the most dangerous creatures Earth had ever created. He had seen Spark in training exercises, had watched the Griffin take down combat drones with terrifying efficiency. Spark was smart, fast, and utterly loyal to Mirai. And he still remembered Threshold 9. "Have you heard the news?" Mirai asked, her tone becoming serious. "About the Vraktul expansion?" Doyen said. "Yes, I was briefed this morning." Mirai's expression darkened. "They're moving fast. 3 systems absorbed in the last 6 months. The species living there had no choice. Submit or be destroyed. And their route is bringing them toward human space," Doyen said quietly. "Toward us specifically," Mirai added. She pulled out a datapad and showed him the star charts. "Look at this. They could have taken a dozen different routes to expand their territory, but Fleet Admiral Thulvrak specifically chose this path, the one that goes through New Jeju." Doyen studied the map. Mirai was right. The Vraktul fleet was making choices that seemed almost deliberate, bringing them directly toward this colony. "He remembers," Doyen said. "He remembers," Mirai agreed. Spark growled softly, a sound that rumbled in his chest. The Griffin's eyes were fixed on the datapad, as if he could understand the maps. Maybe he could. The door to the observation platform opened and Chief Engineer Choi Sung-min hurried out. He was a stocky man in his 40s, brilliant but perpetually worried. He carried another datapad and his expression was grim. "Captain, we have a problem," he said. "Another one?" Doyen asked. "The defense satellites are online, but if the Vraktul come with a full fleet, we won't last more than a few hours. Our corvettes are good ships, but we only have 6 of them. Intelligence reports say Thulvrax is traveling with at least 40 warships." 40, Mirai repeated softly. She looked at Spark. The Griffin looked back at her, and something passed between them. Understanding. Determination. "What about evacuation?" Sungmin asked. "We could get the civilians out, at least the children and elderly." "To where?" Doyen said. "The nearest human colony is 3 days away by civilian transport. If Thulvrax is coming here, he'll intercept any evacuation ships." "No, we stay and fight." "Fight?" Sungmin looked at him like he was crazy. "Captain, this isn't a battle we can win." "Maybe not in the traditional way," Doyen agreed. "But we have advantages the Vraktul don't know about." He looked at Spark. "How many Griffins are stationed on New Jeju now?" Mirai's eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. 48, including Spark. Most are bonded to colonists. Some are still in training with the Defense Force. 48, Doyen repeated, a smile forming on his face. "Against 40 warships. Those are better odds than it sounds." Sungmin shook his head. "I don't understand. Griffins are amazing creatures, but they're not warships. How can they possibly—" "Because the Vraktul think like you do," Doyen interrupted gently. "They think in terms of ships and weapons and conventional warfare. They don't understand what Griffins really are. They see animals, pets. They don't see intelligence, loyalty, and memory combined with the perfect aerial predator." That afternoon, Doyen called a meeting in the colony's main hall. He gathered the Griffin riders, the Defense Force pilots, and the key civilian leaders. Medical Officer Yoon Hana was there, along with Sung Min and Mirai. Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo, the cocky young fighter pilot who led the human wing, sat in the front row with his arms crossed. Doyen stood at the podium and explained the situation. The Vraktul were coming. They would likely arrive within 2 weeks. The colony had to prepare. "We're not evacuating?" someone asked from the crowd. "No," Doyen said firmly. "This is our home. We defend it." "How?" another voice called out. "We're outgunned by 10 to 1. Doyen looked at Mirai. She stood up and Spark rose beside her. The massive Griffin drew gasps from those who hadn't seen him in a while. He had grown even in the last few months. "We have 48 Griffins," Mirai said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Each one is bonded to a rider. Each one is intelligent, trained, and ready to fight. Griffins can fly faster than most fighter craft. They can dodge weapons that ships cannot. They can land on warships and tear through armor. And they work together with a coordination that no drone or AI can match." "But they're still just animals," someone said skeptically. Spark turned his head toward the speaker. His eyes locked onto the man, and he let out a low, rumbling growl. The sound filled the hall, making everyone fall silent. It was not a threatening sound exactly, but it was a reminder that these were not pets. "Griffins remember," Doyen said into the silence. 2 years ago, on Threshold 9 Station, the Vraktul commander Thulvrax grabbed Spark by the neck when he was just a baby. He mocked him, hurt him, made him feel helpless. Doyen paused. "Spark has not forgotten, and now Thulvrax is coming here. This isn't just a battle for territory. This is personal." Mirai nodded. "Every Griffin here knows the story. They communicate with each other in ways we don't fully understand. They know what the Vraktul did. They know what's coming, and they are ready." Over the next 2 weeks, New Jeju transformed into a fortress. Sungmin worked around the clock to upgrade the defense satellites, creating kill zones in orbit. Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo drilled the fighter pilots relentlessly, practicing coordination with the Griffin riders. Yoon Hana prepared the medical facilities and evacuation protocols for the civilian shelters deep underground. And the Griffins trained. Doyen watched them from the observation platform every day. They flew in formation, 48 massive creatures moving through the sky like a deadly dance. They practiced attack runs on decommissioned ships, tearing through hull plating with their claws. They practiced evasive maneuvers, dodging simulated weapons fire with impossible grace. Spark led them. The other Griffins followed his example, looked to him for guidance. He was the oldest, the first to bond, the one who remembered Threshold 9 most clearly. And in his eyes, Doyen could see something that made him both proud and sad. Spark was not doing this for strategy or territory. He was doing this for Mirai, because she was his bonded human, and someone had threatened her once, had made her scared, had hurt her companion. Griffins never forgot, and they never forgave. On the 13th day, the alarm sounded. Long-range sensors picked up a massive fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 42 Vraktul warships, bristling with weapons, their hulls decorated with the marks of conquest. At the center of the fleet was the flagship, and on that flagship, Doyen knew, was Fleet Admiral Thulvrax, coming back to mock the humans again, coming back to the place where he had grabbed a helpless baby creature and laughed. Doyen stood on the command deck of the defense center, looking at the sensor displays. Around him, his staff worked frantically, preparing for battle. But Doyen felt calm, almost peaceful. He opened a communication channel to all the Griffin riders. "This is Captain Han Doyen. The enemy is here. Remember your training, trust your Griffins, and show them why Earth's guardians are legendary." Outside, across the colony, 48 Griffins lifted into the air. Their wings caught the sunlight, turning them into golden shadows against the sky. And at their head, larger than all the others, flew Spark. The baby who had been mocked was now a warrior, and he was going home to deliver a message that had been 2 years in the making. The Vraktul fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal predators. 42 warships, each one 3 times the size of humanity's largest corvette. Their weapons were charged, their shields were active, and their engines glowed with power. They had come to conquer, and they expected no resistance. On the bridge of the flagship, Fleet Admiral Thulvrax sat in his command chair. He was larger now than he had been 2 years ago, his scales marked with new decorations of rank. His yellow eyes stared at the view screen, which showed the small human colony spread across the planet's surface. "Pathetic," he rumbled. "They have not even evacuated. They think they can stand against us." His second officer, a younger Vroktul named Draxor, tilted his head. "Perhaps they hope to surrender peacefully?" "I do not accept surrenders from insects," Thulvrax said. He leaned forward. "Open a communication channel to the colony. Let me speak to them." Down on New Jeju, in the defense center, Doyen received the incoming transmission. He nodded to his communications officer. "Put him on screen." Thulvrax's face appeared, filling the main display. He looked exactly as Doyen remembered. Arrogant, cruel, absolutely certain of his superiority. "Humans of New Jeju," Thulvrax began, his voice booming through the speakers. "I am Fleet Admiral Thulvrax of the Vroktul Empire. You are in violation of territorial claims. Surrender your colony immediately, or we will take it by force." Doyen stepped forward, facing the screen. "This is Captain Han Doyen, Defense Coordinator. We reject your claims. This is human territory, recognized by the Galactic Council. You have no authority here." Thulvrax laughed, that grinding sound Doyen remembered so well. "The Galactic Council is weak. Their rules mean nothing to the strong." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Wait, I remember you. You were at Threshold 9. You stood in the corner during the negotiations. You said something. What was it?" "I warned you," Doyen said calmly. "I told you that you had made a mistake." "Ah, yes," Thulvrax said, his mouth curving into a smile. "The pet. The tiny, squealing creature. Is it still alive? Did it grow into a slightly larger pet?" He laughed again. "That encounter told me everything I needed to know about your species. You are sentimental fools who bring animals to diplomatic meetings, and now you will pay for your weakness." Behind Doyen, a door opened. Mireille walked onto the command deck. She wore full flight gear, her helmet under one arm. Her expression was cold and determined. She stepped up beside Doyen, facing the screen. "Fleet Admiral," she said quietly. Thulvrax's eyes focused on her. "Ah, the pet keeper. I remember you as well. Tell me, is your pathetic creature still with you?" "He is," Mireille said. She turned slightly and made a gesture. From outside the defense center, visible through the large windows, a shadow passed. Then another. Then dozens more. Thulvrax's expression changed slightly as he tried to process what he was seeing. On his own view screens, his officers were suddenly reporting massive life forms in the planet's atmosphere. Flying creatures. Big ones. Mireille smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You wanted to see Spark again? He wanted to see you too. He's thought about you every day for 2 years. He remembers exactly how you grabbed him, how you shook him, how you dropped him. Griffins have perfect memory, Admiral. They never forget a threat." The view screen suddenly split, showing both Thulvrax's face and an external camera view from the flagship. In that camera view, a massive golden-brown shape was flying directly toward the fleet. Behind it, dozens more shapes followed. They moved with incredible speed and precision. Spark filled the camera view. He was enormous, his wings spread wide, his talons extended. His eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, were locked onto the flagship, onto Thulvrax. And in those eyes was recognition, memory, and purpose. "That creature remembers you," Doyen said softly, "and now he's strong enough to do something about it." The transmission cut off as Thulvrax began shouting orders to his crew. On New Jeju, Doyen turned to his staff. "Launch all fighters, activate the satellite defense grid, and send a message to all Griffin riders. Engage at will." Lieutenant Bei Jinwoo was already in his fighter, launching from the colony's airfield. His squadron formed up around him, 6 sleek human craft that looked tiny compared to the Vroktul warships, but they were fast and well-armed. "All wings, this is Alpha Leader," Jinwoo said into his communicator. Stick to the plan. We provide covering fire and draw their attention. Let the Griffins do the real work. Understood, Alpha Leader, his wingmen responded. Above them, the Griffins climbed higher, reaching the edge of the atmosphere where space began. They needed no ships, no life support. Earth's engineers had designed them to survive in low orbit for short periods, using a combination of efficient oxygen storage and biological systems that could operate in near vacuum. Spark led the formation. Miri sat in the riding saddle, her flight suit sealed, her helmet providing oxygen and protection. She could feel Spark's heartbeat through the saddle, steady and strong. She could feel his determination, his anger, his memory of that day 2 years ago. "Ready, Spark?" she whispered through their communication link. The Griffin's response came not in words, but in emotion. Readiness, eagerness, justice. The Vroktul fleet opened fire first. Massive energy weapons lanced out from the warships, trying to hit the approaching Griffins. But the creatures were too fast, too agile. They scattered and dove, weaving between the energy beams with ease. What could hit a slow-moving ship could not touch a living creature that could change direction in an instant. The human fighters engaged next, firing missiles at the Vroktul ship's shield generators. The missiles exploded against the shields, weakening them but not penetrating. That was fine. That was the plan. Then the Griffins attacked. 48 massive creatures slammed into the Vroktul fleet like a golden storm. They landed on ship hulls, their talons gripping metal. Their beaks, harder than diamond, tore through armor plating. Their wings beat with such force that they created shockwaves in the thin atmosphere. Spark reached the flagship first. He landed on the upper hull with an impact that shook the entire ship. His talons pierced through the outer armor like it was paper. Mireille unstrapped from the saddle and planted magnetic charges on the hull, small but powerful explosives that would help them breach the interior. Inside the flagship, alarms were screaming. Thulvrak stumbled as the ship shook. "What was that?" he roared. "Something is on the hull, Admiral," an officer reported, his voice panicked. "Multiple somethings. They're tearing through the armor." "Impossible. Use the point defense cannons." "They're too close, Admiral. The cannons can't angle to hit them." This was the genius of using Griffins. They were too small for the big weapons, too close for the point defense systems, too fast for missiles. They existed in a tactical space that the Vroktul had never encountered before. Spark's beak punched through the hull. Air began venting into space. Mirai activated the magnetic charges, and a section of the hull blew inward. She and Spark entered the flagship, moving through corridors that were suddenly exposed to vacuum. The Vroktul crew scrambled, trying to seal emergency bulkheads, but Spark was faster. He moved through the ship like a hunting bird, following corridors that led toward the bridge. He remembered the layout. He had never been inside this ship before, but somehow he knew. Perhaps it was intelligence, perhaps it was instinct, or perhaps it was simply the bond between him and Mirai, her human understanding of ship designs combining with his enhanced senses. Outside, the battle continued. Chief Engineer Sungmin's defense satellites activated, creating zones of crossfire that the Vroktul ships had to navigate. When a warship moved into one of these kill zones, the satellites opened fire with focused energy beams. The Vroktul shields could handle it, but it slowed them down, made them predictable. And when they slowed down, the Griffins struck. One by one, Vroktul warships found their engines torn apart, their weapon systems disabled, their hulls breached. The creatures worked in perfect coordination, communicating through sounds that Doyen's sensors could barely detect. They shared information about weak points, about which ships had lowered shields, about where to strike next. Lieutenant Jin Woo pulled his fighter into a tight turn, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. "This is insane," he muttered. "It's actually working." On his sensors, he could see Vroktul ships trying to retreat, trying to reorganize. But every time they formed up, Griffins would dive through their formation, scattering them. 3 warships had already been forced to withdraw, their systems too damaged to continue fighting. Inside the flagship, Spark reached a sealed bulkhead. Mireille checked her scanner. "The bridge is on the other side," she said. Spark understood. He braced himself and slammed his shoulder against the bulkhead. Once, twice, 3 times. The metal groaned and buckled. On the fourth impact, it gave way, tearing open. The bridge of the flagship was chaos. Officers were running, shouting, trying to manage the disaster unfolding around them. And in the center, sitting in his command chair, was Thulvrax. The fleet admiral looked up as Spark entered the bridge. For the first time since Doyen had met him, the arrogant alien's expression showed something other than confidence. It showed recognition and fear. "You," Thulvrax whispered. Spark walked forward slowly, deliberately. His talons clicked on the metal floor. His wings were half spread, making him look even larger in the confined space. His eyes never left Thulvrax's face. "Do you remember now?" Mireille asked, her voice distorted through her helmet speaker. "Do you remember the baby you grabbed? The helpless creature you mocked?" Thulvrax stood up from his chair. He was massive, over 9 feet tall, wearing powered armor. He drew a plasma blade, the weapon humming to life. "I am a warrior of the Vroktul Empire. I do not fear beasts." Spark tilted his head. And then he did something that made every Vroktul on the bridge freeze in terror. He chirped. That same high-pitched sound he had made as a baby. But now it came from a creature that weighed over a ton and could tear apart starship armor. It was mockery. Perfect, deliberate mockery. Thulvrax lunged forward with his plasma blade, moving faster than something his size should be able to move. But Spark was faster. The Griffin sidestepped, his talons scraping across the metal floor. The blade passed through empty air where Spark's neck had been a moment before. Spark did not immediately counterattack. Instead, he circled, watching Thulvrax with those intelligent eyes. He was studying the Admiral, learning his movements, just as he had been taught. "Fight, beast!" Thulvrax roared, slashing again. This time, Spark did not dodge. He caught the blade with one talon, gripping it. The plasma burned against his scales, but Spark's biology was designed to handle extreme temperatures. He squeezed, and the weapon shattered, pieces falling to the floor. Thulvrax stumbled back, shock clear on his face. He had never encountered anything like this. A creature that could think, plan, remember. A creature that was not just attacking, but delivering a message. Spark moved forward. He was not in a rush. He had waited 2 years for this moment. 2 years of remembering the feeling of being grabbed by the neck, of being shaken like a toy, of being dropped on a hard floor while massive creatures laughed. He had been helpless then. Small, weak. He was not small anymore. The Griffin's talon lashed out, catching Thulvrax's armor and tearing through it like cloth. The Admiral cried out in pain, falling backward. He tried to scramble away, but Spark was there, blocking his path. The Griffin leaned down, his beak inches from Thulvrax's face, and he chirped again, that same mocking sound. "Spark," Mireille said softly from where she stood near the entrance. "That's enough?" The Griffin glanced at her. For a moment, something passed between them through the bond. An understanding. Mireille was not telling him to stop because she felt sorry for Thulvrax. She was telling him to stop because this had never been about killing. This had been about teaching a lesson. About showing the Admiral exactly what he had done wrong. Spark stepped back. He looked down at Thulvrax, who was bleeding from the wound in his side, his armor torn, his confidence completely shattered. "You bred monsters," Thulvrax gasped, his voice weak. Mireille walked forward, standing beside Spark. She reached up and placed one hand on the Griffin's shoulder. "No," she said quietly. "We bred guardians. We created companions who are loyal, intelligent, and protective. Spark didn't attack you because he's a monster. He attacked you because you threatened his bonded human. Because you hurt him when he was helpless. Because you showed him that you were a danger." She looked around at the other Vroktul on the bridge, who stood frozen, watching. Griffins remember everything. Every face, every voice, every moment. When you treat them with respect, they return that respect. But when you hurt them, when you mock them, when you dismiss them as mere animals, they remember that too, and they never forgive. Thulvrax coughed, a painful sound. We could have destroyed your colony. We still can. Look at your sensors, Mirai said, pointing to the displays on the bridge. Thulvrax turned his head weakly. The displays showed the status of his fleet. 23 ships were completely disabled, their engines destroyed, their weapons offline. 10 more were heavily damaged and withdrawing. Only 9 ships remained combat-capable, and even those were being harassed by Griffins and human fighters. You came here with 42 warships, Mirai said. You were so confident, so certain of your superiority. But you forgot something important. You forgot that strength isn't just about size or weapons. It's about intelligence, about loyalty, about the bonds we create with those we care about. She looked down at Thulvrax, her expression hard. You lost this battle the moment you grabbed Spark on Threshold 9. You just didn't know it yet. Outside the flagship, the battle was ending. The remaining Vroktal ships were retreating, jumping away into faster-than-light travel. They had come to conquer and had been defeated by creatures they had considered pets. The humiliation was complete. Captain Doyen watched from the defense center as the enemy fleet scattered. Around him, his staff was cheering, hugging each other, celebrating the impossible victory. But Doyen remained calm. He opened a communication channel to all units. All Griffin riders, return to base. Human fighters, maintain patrol but do not pursue. Medical teams prepare for casualties. He paused, then added more softly. Well done, all of you. Lieutenant Jin Woo brought his fighter in for landing, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. He had never seen anything like that battle. The Griffins had been magnificent, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. They had moved like they were dancing, each one in perfect harmony with the others. As he climbed out of his cockpit, he saw the Griffins returning. They landed one by one in the designated areas around the colony, their riders dismounting and checking them for injuries. Most of the Griffins were unharmed. A few had minor burns from energy weapons, but nothing serious. And then Spark landed in the central plaza, with Mirai still in the saddle. The Griffin was covered in scratches and scorch marks, but he stood tall and proud. The colonists who had been hiding in the shelters were emerging now, and when they saw Spark, they began to cheer. Children ran forward, and Spark lowered his head gently, letting them touch his beak. He was the same gentle creature he had always been with them. The warrior was gone, replaced by the guardian who let young humans climb on his back and feed him treats. Mirai climbed down and was immediately surrounded by other riders, all of them talking at once, sharing stories of the battle. She answered their questions patiently, but her eyes kept returning to Spark. He looked at her, and she felt the bond between them, stronger than ever. They had faced their nightmare together, and they had won. Doyen arrived in the plaza a few minutes later. He walked up to Mirai and Spark, nodding respectfully to both of them. The flagship is withdrawing, he said. Thulvrax is still alive, but barely. His crew is taking him to their medical facilities. Good, Mirai said. I didn't want him dead. I wanted him to remember. He will, Doyen assured her. They all will. And the news did spread, faster than anyone expected. Within days, every species in the galaxy had heard the story. The mighty Vroktal Empire, conquerors of 300 systems, had been defeated by flying creatures and a tiny human colony. The recordings from the battle were everywhere, showing Griffins tearing apart warships, showing Spark walking through the flagship like he owned it. The galaxy's perception of humanity changed overnight. They were no longer seen as weak or sentimental. They were seen as dangerous. Not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of their ability to create bonds with other beings. Because of their ability to engineer creatures that were both guardians and friends. Ambassador Quan Jiwoo arrived on New Jeju 3 weeks after the battle. She brought with her a delegation of alien representatives, all wanting to meet with the humans. All wanting to establish better relationships. All being very, very careful not to insult anyone or anything. She stood in the plaza with Doyen, watching Spark play with a group of children. The Griffin was letting them ride on his back, flying low and slow so they could feel what it was like to touch the sky. You were right, Quan said to Doyen. On Threshold 9, you told me that Thulvrax had made a mistake. I didn't fully understand what you meant then. And now? Doyen asked. Now, I understand that humanity's strength is not in our ships or our weapons. It's in this. She gestured to Spark and the children. It's in our ability to create families, to bond with others, to inspire loyalty not through fear, but through love and respect. The other species are learning that, Doyen said. Slowly, but they're learning. That evening, Medical Officer Yoon Hana finished treating the last of the wounded. There had been surprisingly few casualties. 12 humans with minor injuries, 3 griffins with burns that would heal in a few weeks, and hundreds of Roktul who had learned a very hard lesson. She found Mirai in the research center, doing a detailed check of Spark's condition. The griffin lay on a specially reinforced platform, his eyes half closed, content. How is he? Hana asked. Perfect, Mirai said, running her scanner over Spark's wings. A few scratches, some bruising, but nothing serious. He'll be fully healed in a week. And how are you? Mirai paused, considering the question. I feel complete. For 2 years, we've been carrying this memory, this anger, this need for justice. And now it's done. Thulvrax knows what he did wrong. The galaxy knows not to underestimate griffins. And Spark? She looked at her bonded companion. Spark is at peace. The griffin opened one eye and chirped softly, a sound of contentment. In the following months, New Jeju became famous. Tourists came from across human space to see the colony that had defeated a Vraktul fleet. To meet the griffins. To hear the story firsthand. The colony grew from 50,000 to over 100,000 inhabitants. New research centers were built. New griffin breeding programs were established. And everywhere in the galaxy, other species began to reconsider their understanding of humanity. They realized that humans did not think like other species. Humans formed connections that went beyond logic or strategy. They created families not just with their own kind, but with any being that showed loyalty and trust. A year after the battle, a young child named Kim Sora stood in the plaza, looking up at Spark with wide, wondering eyes. She was only 5 years old, visiting New Jeju with her parents. She had heard the stories about the griffin who remembered, the guardian who had defeated an admiral. Mirai watched as Sora approached Spark slowly, her small hand extended. The griffin, who had torn apart warships and terrified an entire fleet, lowered his massive head gently. He let the child touch his beak, her tiny fingers tracing the patterns in his feathers. He's soft, Sora said, smiling. He is, Mirai agreed. He's also the bravest guardian in the galaxy. Spark chirped, that same sound he had made as a baby, but now it was peaceful, happy. The warrior was resting. The guardian was home. And the memory that had driven him for 2 years was finally at peace. Above the colony, 47 other griffins flew patrol patterns, their wings catching the sunlight. They sang to each other, complex sounds that carried across the valley. It was a song of victory, a song of home, a song that said clearly to anyone listening, this place is protected, this family is safe, and if you threaten either, you will learn what we learned. That humanity does not create monsters. Humanity creates guardians, and guardians never forget.